A heartfelt thank you, Massimiliano and Michelangelo, for accepting our invitation. So Debating Debate is a seminar that has been designed within the framework of Hollandinum, which is an acronym in French. You will find the links to this to the website in the chat. It stands for Linguistic Observatory of Digital Debate. And this observatory was born in 2021, conceived by Paola Pietrandrea, my colleague and friend at the University of Lille. I've been involved since then in collaboration with Roma Tre University. I'd like to thank Paola for this eventful journey so far, very interesting one. Since 2021, the Debating Debate seminar has invited philosophers, sociologists, semioticians, linguists, and education experts. The idea is to reflect on the transformation of public debate and our participation. We all know that the environment of social media has changed the way information is accessed in the public sphere, and the digital environment is particularly prone, as we know, to discursive manipulation. So a strong understanding of digital debate seems key to us to prevent misuse of freedom of expression. We'd like to ensure compliance with ethical standards and human rights, avoiding hate speech, defamation, disinformation, just one of the topics that we will mention and work on today. So this is the third edition of Debating Debate, and this edition will primarily focus on the linguistic perspectives of this transformation. So this time we would like to reflect on the ways in which linguistics can provide some tools to citizens to find their footing in this context of change, in this context of semiotic disorder. So the focus is on the need for linguistic and semiotic education to provide citizens media literacy and critical thinking competence when navigating the public sphere. We also look at how discourse analysis, argumentation theory, semiotics, linguistic education in general can contribute to the acquisition of a full digital citizenship. For a more thorough presentation of the rationale behind Hollandinum and this series of seminars, I'd like to refer to a very thorough presentation that Paola Pietrandrea has given a few weeks ago on November 21st, when she opened up this series of seminars. She presented with Alban Wagner de l'Université catholique de Lille, and you will have a link to this first seminar in the chat. Before we start, I'd like to just give the space a little disclaimer. The session will be recorded and will be made available via a YouTube channel. So feel free to contact us if you have any objection to this. We would like to also take this opportunity to thank the institutions and research centers that are supporting this seminar series. So we have, of course, the University of Lille and the research lab STL Langage. We also thank the GISHL, which is the Research Group on Linguistic Education. Together with other bodies, we also have the support of the Italian Association of English Studies and the Island Center, which stands for Identity, Language and Diversity. All right, so without further ado, I'd like to kick off by presenting the first speaker today, Massimiliano De Mata. Hello, Massimiliano.
Hello, everybody.
Massimiliano De Mata is Associate Professor of English Language and Translation at the University of Turin. He was a Fulbright Scholar twice in Yale and Indiana University, and he's held visiting professorships at several institutions, at Saarland University, 2020, Sciences Po Lyon, more recently 2021, and OTH Regensburg 2 years ago. Massimiliano is the co-editor of the Journal of Language and Discrimination, and he has published on populist discourse, on the rhetoric of Donald Trump, a metaphor of the nation and social media discourse, and of course, on conspiracy theory. Massimiliano De Mata has recently authored a very important volume titled Discourses of Borders and the Nation in the USA, a Discourse Historical Analysis, last year at Routledge. and co-edited the 2024 Routledge Handbook of Discourse and Disinformation, together with other colleagues, Stefania Maci, Mark McGlashan, and Philip Sargent. You're very prolific, Massimiliano. I'm sorry to have to sum up this presentation, but maybe we can start going to the heart of the matter. And my first question will be a definitional one, just to set the stage, if you like. How do you think the notions of fake news, disinformation, and misinformation differ from one another? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Judith and Paula, for inviting me here today. It's really a wonderful occasion to talk about our favorite research, our research. If you allow me just 30 seconds, because I would like to actually pay a little homage and tribute to Susan, who is actually with us today, Susan Herring, because actually, as you mentioned, I was Fulbright scholar at Indiana University in 2014, so that's exactly 10 years ago. And I must say that I have an immense debt of gratitude to Susan, because it is actually thanks to her that I actually became interested in all of this. I wanted to work with my Fulbright with a scholar who was interested in computer-mediated communication, and I think that during my 6 months at Indiana University actually got the best of the best. So I'm really thankful to Susan for everything she has done for me. Some of which actually she doesn't know about, but of course, as I said, I have an immense debt of gratitude to her. It really started everything for me in terms of my current research as well. So, and my interest in computer-mediated communication, disinformation, and conspiracy theory discourse, and social media discourse. So it all started with Susan during a very cold winter in Bloomington in 2014. So thank you, Susan, and thank you for being with us today. It was as unexpected as incredibly pleasant to see you here today. Now, having said that, definitions are always dangerous, so to speak, because they sound like exam questions. Okay, so in other words, so there's a certain degree of I don't know, even of pretentiousness in the way we actually talk about fake news, disinformation, misinformation. Well, in fact, starting with fake news, a little bit of trivia. When Stefania Maci and myself actually applied to Routledge for to publish the Routledge Handbook of Discourse and Disinformation, our first title was Routledge Handbook of Discourse and Fake News. And actually, Routledge rejected it because they said, well, fake news is such an ambiguous term that we cannot really use it here. And I think with good reason, because as you probably know, fake news is now mentioned. The person who actually mentioned the lexical item fake news most often is Donald Trump, who actually talks about fake news all the time to define whatever news is actually used against him. And in fact, this is one glaring example of the appropriation of language that is done by populist leaders, the weaponization of language which is done by populist leaders so effectively. So fake news, just to give like a rough idea of what we're talking about, is basically is false information presented as news. Okay, so that's the kind of standard, the classic definition. It kind of overlaps, or rather, I should say, it's included in the concept of disinformation, which is actually false information, which is deliberately spread with malicious intent, very often political or militant intent, to spread some kind of thesis, particularly against somebody. So there is in both disinformation and fake news, this kind of deliberate aspect, which is very important in the way news is actually spread. News and information are actually spread over the internet. Misinformation is something slightly different, because with misinformation we have the diffusion, the spreading of news, of information, which is not correct information, but that is done not deliberately. And sooner or later, everybody has done a little bit of misinformation, very often involuntarily and not really deliberately. But what I think it's important to notice here, as far as your first question is concerned, Judith, is the fact that fake news, disinformation, misinformation are not new phenomena. They've always existed. the history, but you read any history book, and you know that in the history of each and every nation of every age, there is a huge amount of disinformation that has actually led also to very tragic outcomes. Um, but what has changed recently, let's say in the last 20 or 30 years, is the actual speed of this information, as well as, and maybe this is the topic of a question, of this little bit of discussion later on, also the kind of the issue of the degree of literacy that we have, or we don't have, when we actually approach news, or rather when news approaches us, should I say. As I said, disinformation, misinformation, fake news have always existed. False information has always been spread with malicious intent. What has changed really, as I said, is the speed, and that's mainly because of course, of the new, or shall we say, the contemporary, the recent information regime, so to speak, and the environment, particularly of social media, which make communication incredibly accessible to everybody. If I may add only like another aside, I remember 25, 30 years ago when Al Gore, Vice President, Bill Clinton's Vice President, talked about information highways, whereby everybody would have access to information as a kind of guarantee for freedom and democracy. So all information could be available to anybody with an internet connection. So this kind of egalitarian, horizontal style of communication, whereby all information will be accessible to everything. The dream has become a nightmare in many respects, because what we have now, yes, it is accessibility to all kinds of information, but we also have accessibility to all kinds of false and deceiving information, and we've seen many examples of that, of course, during the pandemic. So I think I've already said a lot of things. Actually, there's probably a kind of stimuli and hints for further discussion. So I'll probably stop here. So you tell me how I am going in terms of time management. Okay.
Great as usual. But this is very interesting, and these definitions are not always clear to even people approaching this for the first time, especially
Mhm.
people approaching this for the first time. How disinformed are we about this information? And of course, why is understanding the discourse of this information important to us as citizens? What can be concretely done?
Well, what can be done or cannot be done? Well, it's very difficult to actually legislate, so to speak, either formally or informally about this topic, because, as I said, we have access to all sorts of information. Information comes to us because of the media environment. Okay, so the communication, particularly in terms of computer-mediated communication, it is no longer, top to bottom, so to speak, top down, but it's a kind of a horizontal, so everybody has access to everything. And it's difficult not to be exposed to this information, because information actually comes to us through these objects. So it actually through phones that we get news. And so it's very difficult actually to develop safeguards, so to speak, in order to avoid the false information. Also because, and this is the way actually conspiracy theories themselves are actually constructed, it is very often very difficult to tell the difference between legitimate news and illegitimate news, or fake news, or false news.
We would like to know maybe more about your work on conspiracy theories. So you yourself say finding distinctive linguistic traits across conspiracy theories might be challenging because false narratives just look like so much like they have the same epistemological basis as real narratives. So how can we possibly identify conspiracy theories if they behave like ordinary discourse? I think this is the key problem. And how can we discern this information from reality news in terms of the rhetorical and persuasive strategies that are employed? Maybe you could give us some examples and your work and how you concretely
Yeah.
how to approach this. Thank you.
Okay, let's say first of all that, as you mentioned in your question, it is very difficult because conspiracy theories actually they mimic official discourse. They employ very similar rhetorical strategies used by official, inverted commas, discourses. So it is very difficult actually to tell the difference. I mean, the example that I always give my students is that if somebody comes from Mars or from Saturn or from the outer space, comes to planet Earth for the first time and reads some conspiracy theory and and then some official news, he or she or it, whatever that creature might be termed, would find it incredibly difficult actually to tell exactly what's going on planet Earth, and that's because. In even in epistemological terms, conspiracy theories actually claim legitimacy. They are constructed as a counter discourses compared to the official discourses. So in many respects, they even mimic marginality in the political and social and even cultural sense, because they pose themselves as an alternative to the dominant discourse or dominant discourses. Now, particularly at times of crisis, I don't want to overuse the word crisis, of course, but particularly at times of crisis, when there is, let's say, epistemological uncertainty, then it becomes incredibly difficult actually for people not to believe in conspiracy theories, because conspiracy theories actually provide people with some kind of interpretation of reality, which in a way reassures them. So in other words, conspiracy theories connect the dots between seemingly unrelated events, and they provide explanations which in a way provide some sense of safety, but also as well as some kind of alternative to the official voice of authority, so to speak. Again, this is particularly interesting in the context of social media, where, of course, there is no overarching, gatekeeping. So everybody can actually, particularly now with X and Twitter, whereby you can have all sorts of information without anybody actually inverted commas, controlling it or filtering it, so to speak. I don't want to open another issue, which will probably be for another question, but of course it's very difficult not to be exposed to all sorts of narratives, which at the end of the day, may also be particularly dangerous for democracy, and one should only think of the Steal the Vote conspiracy in 2020, whereby Donald Trump actually claimed that there was some computer program at CIA that actually switched votes from Trump to Biden, and the effects of that conspiracy theory were very visible in January the 6th, 2021, when the Capitol was assaulted by a crowd of Trump supporters who actually did believe in the conspiracy theory. So there are dangers for democracy if people don't vaccinate. Again, this is a contentious issue, but of course, if people do not vaccinate, they run serious health risks. But conspiracy theories, they provide an alternative reading, an alternative interpretation of reality, by providing facts, or apparently facts, which seem to have a solid foundation to those who believe in them. So it is very difficult to dislodge conspiracy theories, because they are so well implanted and they are so credible that they actually appear as true narratives. Okay, and I've studied like a couple of conspiracy theories, or a couple of big conspiracy narratives, like the one on the climate lockdowns, and I've also actually written on Alex Jones, who is the king on conspiracy theories in the USA, and the way, for example, Alex Jones actually spreads his conspiracy theories is very interesting, because he actually gives word to experts, or to pseudo experts, calling them professor or doctor, etc., etc. So doctors, for example, talking about vaccines, or the WHO, the World Health Organization. So we have a whole discourse, which actually claims to be legitimate on the basis of certain discursive strategies, which actually construct an epistemology that appears to be completely legitimate, and that's a huge problem, of course. Not just in terms of whether or not you actually know reality and a certain knowledge of the world, but also in terms of our democratic processes all over the world.
That's why you so interestingly refer to the work of Van Leuven on the legitimation strategies, right? Like
That's right, yeah.
clutching at something that gives authority to a specific claim.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The way conspiracy theories are constructed, they use, for example, authority, the authority of experts, in order to legitimize what they say. That's why the creature from Mars coming down, descending on Earth, would find it very difficult to tell the difference between legitimate news and conspiracy narrative. It's a matter of literacy. There are some differences, but some no, it is not always easy to actually to discern them, to tell the difference between conspiracy and legitimate.
I see that you often refer to it is a matter of perception and interpretation of a certain experience. So have you already looked at this from the metaphor perspective? And you see, according to the metaphor they use, there is a different perception that comes with it. I don't know if you've explored this already or not, because you're an metaphor as well.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. No, actually, no. That's an aspect of which I've not explored yet, to be honest. But that's one of the like a New Year's proposals, so to speak.
Thank you. I think we still have some time. There's so many questions. I would just quickly ask last one and then leave the floor open to our audience. There is a question I must ask on the link between conspiracy theory and populist politics in the US. As you say in your works, these two, they share several features. So they seem to emerge at a period of crisis, of course. Conspiracy theories and populist politics are both based on the dichotomy absolute good versus absolute evil. And the conspiracy mindset and the populist one are both very divisive. They are often used, so conspiracy theories are used by populist parties to delegitimize the establishment, the epistemological authorities. As you say, we should just consider the 2016 elections and the first time Donald Trump came to power and the outcome of the Brexit saga. Do you think, Massimiliano, that we have learned our lesson in a way? So in which way have recent studies on conspiracy theories had an impact on how we saw the 2024 elections in any different way? Has this happened? How could this possibly happen again? Thank you.
Well, no, I don't think that. I mean, given the recent events, I don't think we have learned a lot from that. But yes, it is true that populism and conspiracy theories in the U.S. and elsewhere, they actually go hand in hand. They share the same distrust for authority, whether it is political authority or medical authority, scientific authority, and so on. They propose a very polarized, like let's say, field whereby you have, you are, either with one party or the other party. So, in other words, there's a very strong polarization in opinions. Again, social media presented the perfect opportunity and the perfect environment to present these polarized views because with social media, with echo chambers, with a little bit of help from algorithms as well, you have a polarization of opinions whereby people who believe in something, they speak to each other, they reject other people's opinions, and so on and so forth. So in other words, in fact, proof of the matter is that you rarely have debates, real, genuine debates on social media. So you have very polarized opinions, and both populist leaders and parties, and conspiracy theories actually share the same approach to social reality. So there's this huge polarization, and it's no accident that actually populist leaders do believe in conspiracy theories. They use conspiracy theories for their own purposes because they are part of the kind of anti-establishment rhetoric, which is so profoundly like part of populist politics. No, don't think we have learned a lot. I mean, if anything, conspiracy has been normalized. So, in other words, it is quite common and frequent actually to find politicians using conspiracy theories. Of course, as we all probably know, fact checking or debunking don't really work. Because if you believe in a certain conspiracy narrative, you do not accept other people's points of view or perceptions. And again, this is also fostered and finds the perfect environment on the internet and in social media, particularly, where you have this separate groups kind of which do not talk to each other than insulting each other. So it's not an easy situation, so to speak, because as I said earlier on, the victim is really democratic coexistence, and we can see that in many different national contexts, the US, but not just the US, in fact. So yeah, I find it particularly worrying. And as I said, there's very little we can do to counteract certain beliefs when they are so strongly implanted in people's minds. Something that probably should also be mentioned is something that, of course, I'm pretty sure that everybody in the audience is thinking about is also this concept of post-truth, which in a way prevents, from an academic perspective, like a serious and healthy debate, because the idea that conspiracy theories go against the truth, it's not enough to explain really what's going on. But maybe there will be questions from the audience or from you, but about that. But I'll probably stop here about regarding this matter.
Thank you. I hope we have some time to expand on the notion of truth. I'll just open the floor to the questions. I'm sure you have quite a few, so feel free to either type them in the chat or take the floor. There is absolutely no constraint. Let's just give them a few seconds.
Yeah. Max, I just want to say thank you. I have to leave, but it was a pleasure to be able to join you even for this short period of time and listen to your thoughts.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Susan.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. I would have a question. So we talked to you, we asked you about disinformation, and you have written some important works on this specific subject. But you mentioned the original dream of Web 2.0, and I was wondering if, in your view, there is still anything worth saving in this dream. So in other words, has the digital revolution just turned reality into a nightmare, as you mentioned? Just weakening democracy, or maybe, I don't know, we are just going through an adjustment phase. And if it is the case, my question as a linguist is, what can we do as linguists? Can we do something to help set things right?
Yes, I'm actually, right now, let's say as of the 19th of December 2024, I can probably rank among the pessimists. So in other words, as things are going right now, I see that, as you said, it may be actually a period of adjustment right now. But let's say the hints for the future are not particularly positive as far as I can see now. I may be wrong. There maybe tomorrow there will be some kind of digital revolution and everybody will be happy ever after. We don't know that, of course, yet. But I'm rather skeptical right now because of what's happening, and that does not necessarily depend on my own ideological or political positions at all. Actually, it's just an observation from a scholarly point of view. What can we do? Well, we can certainly try to promote media literacy, and approaching media with a critical eye, which is something that media and discourse and language with a critical eye, which is something that I've been doing for the last 20 years or so. But also teaching them not just about the value of language and the value of words, not just teaching students and society at large about the value of language and value of words, but also the value of how language could actually help us share ideals and foster discussion rather than dividing us. I'm not into particularly necessarily into peace and love, ethics or something like that, but certainly the idea that the use of certain words can actually divide society and actually produce fractures and breakdowns, between social groups, for example. That's something that should be, of course, discouraged at all levels. I'm lucky enough, just like Michelangelo, to work in a department of political science with students who are highly motivated. They're probably going to be tomorrow's lawmakers. And the idea is that, we actually teach them the value of words and how words are things. The words are actually real, concrete things. They're not just messages. So the medium is indeed the message. So what we always try to do is indeed to promote the idea that the use of language is important, and language can be, has always been, weaponized. But then on the other hand, in fact, we can also decommission language as well. So in other words, use it not as a weapon, but as an instrument of cooperation and exchange, as it as it should be, because of course language is a social phenomenon first of all. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. Is there any other question?
I have another one,
Yeah.
but if someone wants to raise in a way or another his or her hand and ask a question, that's a small question concerning the degree of literacy you mentioned at the beginning of your talk, just to point to the differences between the kind of disinformation, the circulation of this information we had in the past and what we have now. So you say there is a difference in speed, and there is a difference in the degree of literacy, but you left this information probably for the discussion. I would like to know more about the degree of literacy and what changed in the degree of literacy that probably explains why this information is no more exactly like it was in the past. If I understood correctly, I don't know.
No, well, okay, as I said, this information, has always existed. Degree of literacy, I am not implying in the least that people now are less educated than they were, 20, 50 or 100 years ago. Of course, I'm not saying that. What I was trying to say is that, of course, it is, as I said, very difficult to tell the difference between legitimate news and illegitimate news, shall we call them that way. And there's also a very strong political, ideological, as well as personal or even psychological motivations behind the choice of either a conspiracy narrative or a legitimate narrative. So that's also something that should be taken into account. So it's not just improving literacy that we can actually improve the whole situation. But it's really literacy plays a strong part, certainly, in that respect. We should actually, and as I said, it becomes very complicated to tell the difference between a fake story and a real story because of the amount of information, even legitimizing a fake story. What I've noticed is that, conspiracy narratives usually have a degree of emotional language, which is higher than the, let's say, legitimate news. For example, just to give you an example, which is quite well known, the whole anti-vax discourse is actually based on the one hand, the authority of or the pseudo-authority of medical sources. So doctors who actually say that the vaccines are indeed dangerous for people's health. And then on the other hand, you also have a very strong emotional drive, for example, showing photos of children who are the victims of vaccination and so on and so forth. So there is a degree of emotions in terms of language, which is much higher in conspiracy narratives, a degree of verbal violence, which is higher than standard or legitimate discourse. So in that sense, in terms of literacy, we can do something there. And to show how weaponized language can be, and we should, therefore, for that reason, try to avoid that. Again, this changes from context to context, as we know. Even the legislation on free speech and freedom of speech differs greatly from between the USA and most European countries. So, it's always difficult to say, okay, where should we stop? When should we stop talking about in a certain way about certain subjects? But I think in terms of literacy, that's something that we should really try to foster and to show how emotional, for example, language can be when talking about certain issues that do not need to be emotional at all, that they should be actually treated in as an objective way, as a scientific way as possible.
Thanks, Paola. Thank you for this question. I don't know if there is any other remark or feedback or questions from the audience.
If I may, I have a question, and thank you for your the precise definition between fake news, disinformation, and misinformation. So, and the emotional aspects of some of political speech and populist speech. And I'm now working on immigration discourse. And if I may, I think the choice of a particular word in political speech and in the media seems to muzzle the critical mind and critical thinking of users. And how can we counteract and maybe apply some notions, scientific notions, to educate students or citizens?
Well, okay, you actually gave me the perfect opportunity actually to talk about this, because immigration discourse is one particular area in which we see the weaponization of language. Because of course, for example, when we talk about immigration, it is almost, there are very highly conventional metaphors now to use, for example, the invasion of migrants, or on the other hand, the wave of migrants, the flood of migrants, the tsunami of migrants, and so on and so forth. So in other words, these metaphors have been normalized to such an extent that even those who actually do not oppose necessarily immigration actually use them. I have found, this is not scientific, this is just empirical, this is just my own observations. I very rarely read something like the arrival of migrants. So I always find, the invasion of migrants or the wave of migrants, etc. So of course, by using these metaphors, we kind of, communicate very often unconsciously at a cognitive level already a kind of hostility towards a certain social group. So we frame it, the whole issue, in terms which, in theory, have nothing to do with the issue itself. We see that very often, for example, in the populist rhetoric, and in Donald Trump's rhetoric as well. I mean, again, he has won the elections this year, and the #1 item of his campaign was again immigration. And he actually said, you know, like we have to stop the invasion, we have to seal the borders, we have to stop the invasion. And it's also interesting because he uses a war metaphor, and then he switches to the reality of war, saying that the army should take care of migrants. So we should deploy divisions of, you know, of the U.S. Army to the borders to stop migrants. So the metaphor becomes reality, you know, in many respects. So I guess that's also something that should be done. And the problem is that the populist leaders are very clever in setting the agenda. They actually use certain words that everybody else uses, even the people who actually oppose them. And so you actually consolidate, you strengthen a certain frame and frame of interpretation as well in people's minds. And so one particular segment of our, you know, education mission, so to speak, it would actually be to make people perceive that language is a matter of choice, and that, you know, certain words, choosing certain words can actually generate certain mental pictures and certain cognitive reactions, and so it's important actually to view, you know, to choose how we talk about a certain social phenomena in using words that do not necessarily actually lead us to conflict or even warfare, indeed.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sangwan, for this question. If there is no other question from the audience, I take the liberty, Massimiliano, to share your email address.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Want to contact you in the future or ask you questions at a later stage. Do not hesitate. This was delightful, insightful, so many aspects that really dovetail with what we do at Hollandinum and with the scope of the studies that have been carried out so far. So it's very, very fitting. So thanks for this, for your participation.
Thank you, Judith. Thank you, Paula. And thank you for the
Paula.
questions.
Opportunity. And she really much insisted on disinformation as being one of the pillars of this new seminar. If there is no objection, maybe I just shift smoothly to our second speaker today, Michelangelo Conoscenti. Good morning, Michelangelo. Michelangelo is a full professor of English linguistics at the University of Turin. His main research interest lies in the analysis of political and military discourse. He has acted as academic coordinator of NATO's working groups on information operations and psychological operations, what's called inform and influence activities, complemented by original research on the role of language in these activities. Michelangelo Conoscenti has researched and served as external consultant at several military institutions, among them the US Command for Special Operations in Florida, the NATO Strategic Communications Center of Excellence in Latvia, and the Defense Center of Excellence for Strategic Studies in Rome. He's also taught intercultural communication and negotiation at the Diplomatic Institute of the Military Foreign Affairs in Rome. He has published a number of monographs. So once again, I am sorry, I will have to sum up your prolific production, Michelangelo. Your monographs include language engineering and media management strategies in recent wars back in 2004. And other contributions include audience architecture, reverse language engineering, very interesting notion, problems and opportunities for social media intelligence, and digital media management units. He's also the author of Europe at the Center of Military Inform and Influence Activities, Implications for the European Public Debate. And of course, I would like to mention his paper in the book of the Routledge Handbook disinformation. I think this is going to be at the center of our discussion today on military discourse. I will quickly ask you a first question, Michelangelo. About disinformation campaigns, just to stay in a way close to what Massimiliano has shared so far with us. Social media, as we know, have had a significant impact on the spread of disinformation, as we are discussing this morning, and as we know, making them more pervasive than ever before. Could you tell us more about the role played by military forces in trying to mitigate the challenges posed by information and counter its hostile influence on our opinion, on public opinion? Thank you.
Thank you, Judita, and thank you, Paula, first of all, for inviting me, and good morning. It has been interesting to listen to Massimiliano. We are so busy in the department that this was one of the few opportunities that we can listen to each other in a quiet environment. First of all, I would add for the happiness of Saint-Ouen, another definition of better terminology, because unfortunately, when we are talking about misinformation, disinformation, etc., most of us, and even in the essay you were mentioning, the military approach to the information environment, I was trying to classify all of this. The recent one was made popular by the European Commission just the week before the European elections. That was FIMI, or Foreign Information Manipulation and Interference. And this is very interesting because it immediately gives the idea of where the problem lies. Because if you say foreign interferences, you are declaring that you are a follower and you are not a trendsetter. In the sense that, going very straight to the point, at the moment here in Europe and even in the United States, I mean, I don't like to use so much the West, but this is the situation. We are barely trying to counter these disinformation campaigns. We have on the one side what we now call digital authoritarian actors, namely China, Russia, Iran, for example, that are very active. And we have the digital democratic actors that unfortunately cannot but just try to resist or to avoid the worst damages of their campaigns. And in a while, I will try to explain why. So, first of all, the problem is that from a military point of view, you were perfectly correct to use counter. Normally, you have information and counter-information. You have, for example, intelligence and counterintelligence. This means that the actors are trying to adopt countermeasures when there is an offensive action from the other side, or the opponent, or the enemy, call it whatever you want. The point is that at the moment, Europe and NATO are completely unable to try to counter because they lack a doctrine and a strategy. Just to give you an idea, in the last year, early this year, in the springtime, China reshuffled and reorganized again all of the military sections that are devoted to these kind of activities. Now they are under the direct control of President Xi Jinping. So what Xi Jinping says, it's doctrine, and immediately you have the effects on their actions. Russia changed again, it was 7 months ago, its doctrine about disinformation, but inform and influence activities. What is the great problem? The problem is that they are authoritarian actors. So they don't care about the rules that we are imposing on ourselves. For example, even NATO military personnel who are involved in these kind of operations, for example, cannot use an alias, or they cannot be undercover. there are very rare occasions where they can assume a different identity. And of course, the Chinese and the Russian mainly, but even the Iranians, for example, Iranians fabricated fake news, fake videos to be used by Hamas during the conflict that we know is at the moment developing in the Gaza Strip. As I was saying, the point is that they are very active and they have no restraints. So NATO and Europe at the moment, European Union, lack a narrative, a coherent narrative, a coherent strategic communication plan, and furthermore, even resources devoted to this. There are organizational problems that, if you want, we can discuss later on. But the point is that, for example, the very well-known Troll Factory, or better, that the real name is the Internet Research Agency that is based in St. Petersburg, has got something as 350 people working 24 hours a day on generating this information. The European Commission has a very poor page that is called EU versus Disinfo. And if you want, we will talk about this later. I have a sample of it, just one of their last messages. 5 people, and they are external to the Commission. So they are hired from outside, so they are not a part of the Commission. This is already giving you an idea. And I give you another example, just to give you how they are effective. For example, at the University of Turin, we have a lot of foreign students. Plenty of them are coming from China, from Russia, and we know that some of them are there to exfiltrate information. They are there because they want to understand what's going on in Europe, etc. And as Massimiliano was saying, what is very interesting, one of the basics of their techniques is that they are able to pick up information and reuse the same language of the community they are in. So they infiltrate communities, discourse communities, they mimic their language, and then little by little, they propose their agenda, because the point is not saying, oh, the Russians or the Chinese are better. No, the point is they just want to show that Western democracies are failed states and failed democracies. Just to give you an idea, Donald Trump, because I'm a supporter of the fact that Trump is in a way strictly linked with Mr. Putin, because the idea of failed state and failed democracies are, and failed truth, of course, are part of the Dugin and Gerasimov doctrine. Dugin's probably is familiar to you. You heard during the Ukrainian war that Dugina, her daughter was killed in a bombing attack. Actually, probably it was Dugin that was the target of that attack. But anyway, their doctrine is, you have your truth, we have our truth. And the point is that you try to infiltrate the dot in the discourse communities. So I was saying, we know that we have plenty of students that are there to exfiltrate information. And I show you, and I share with you just this. It's okay. Just a moment. Look at this. This is from the Academy of Social Sciences in St. Petersburg. And this is a kind of review, in a way, that was made by a former student of mine. I knew she was there to exfiltrate information. And in fact, at the end, here you can read, this is Michelangelo Conoscenti, and I will see you in the note. She is reporting about my activities, because in my activities, I'm criticizing NATO, also NATO, not just NATO. But the point is that they are picking up, it's cherry picking. So they decided to write something, a report where it says, you know, this man is critical of NATO, etc. So it's the idea of failed state, etc. But sorry, because I interrupted myself. I was saying that Donald Trump, during his debate with President Biden, in 3 different moments during the debate, he said that America is a failed democracy. So this is just to give you an idea how active they are. Then there is another point. The point is that not only the military, and if you want, then I will better explain what I'm talking about. Not only our military are completely unable to counter, because, for example, the doctrine says that you shouldn't use these operations targeting your own population, although this is disputable. But the point is that not only so they are unable to do this, but the point is that they are completely unable to counter, as you were saying. So we are subject. The point is that as far as China and Russia is concerned, they are targeting with military techniques civilian populations. So the point is that at least at the information level, they are at war with us. But the point is that to them, the war is 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. While the NATO doctrine says information operations, psychological operation, and all the others should be used in wartime, for them, there is no distinction. They are working actively and, as I said, proactively in this way all of the time. So to make a long story short, the military are acting, but they cannot act properly, and especially on our field. Traditionally, if they are active, they are targeting, but their goal is not to counter on their countries. This is something that there was a great problem at the European Commission level. In 2017, we were so close to have the European Commission and NATO to have a center to counter disinformation, Russian disinformation. It was so clear, so close, because I was one of the chief negotiators, and unfortunately we had a veto. It was a German veto. I can say that and the point was, later we discovered what. Now Angela Merkel is going around Europe to try to revirginate herself as a great European leader. But the point is that she was one of the people who vetoed this, because we perfectly know her connections with the Russians and Putin and Gazprom, etc. She was paid and sitting in the board of one of these. So as you can imagine, she didn't want to displease Russians having a center for counter information.
This is fascinating. Thank you so much. Because my question was, so why isn't the Commission or other international bodies working for an internet research agency that can safeguard reliable information? Why can't we have every source with a sort of reliability of trustworthiness rate attached to it? You see what I mean? And the question is very naive, because the reasons are not logistical or practical, but of course political.
It's political, yes. It's political, and furthermore, they are completely unable, because then, as I said, the advantage of the others is that you have one boss, and the boss that is kind of dictator, or at least authoritarian authority, says, this is the doctrine. Just to give you an idea, the Atlantic Council is the one that is admitting new terminologies within the NATO doctrine. And at the moment, there's no official definition for strategic communication, because all the countries are unable to have a common, or what is called NATO accepted and NATO accepted definition. So the American have a definition, the British have another one, the French have another one, etc. And they cannot negotiate what is the idea of, for example, strategic communication. And the point is, because each of them, first of all, is saying, given that national interests are safeguarded. So it's like having a kind of European bank, and you don't want to give up your lira or Deutschmark, etc. As far as the military are concerned, they don't have a NATO-agreed definition of for example, strategic communication. While the others, as I said, in the last year changed their organization, they changed their doctrine, etc. And we are still deciding about definitions.
Not doing things with words. Thank you so much. I was also intrigued by your studies on the on alternative social media platforms, I'm thinking of Telegram and their secret chats. So what is the role of these alternative social media platforms in the contemporary information landscape? I mean, it looks like divisive narratives thrive in these spaces in which can be used to deliberately spread false information. Can you tell us more?
Yes. First of all, I noticed that you were talking about alternative. Actually, let's say there are different social media, and each of them is particularly suited for a discourse community or a target group, and the target group can be age, it can be social class, etc. For example, Telegram, that is, as you know, in France, because one of the owners of Telegram was arrested in France. In fact, in my paper that was written in 2021, I was saying the owners of Telegram are at least people you should talk about because they sold, for example, Ukrainian private data to the Russians, etc. And it was evident why they were doing so, etc., because they are Russians, of course. So they are not alternative. Let's say that some groups will find there a specific or better place to proliferate. So the fact is that, for example, you were mentioning Telegram. Have you ever heard about Signal? For example, yeah, Signal, for example, is used even by the intelligence community because they know that it is so protected that even them can use Signal to exchange messages if needed. So Telegram is a safe harbor for certain groups because it's not so strict in the privacy control. It will not allow, or they say it will not allow Americans to have a look at what's going on there, etc. So it's the perfect place where to discuss certain things and spread certain ideas. But as you know, Telegram is used by QAnon, for example, but it's not the only place where QAnon is spreading its ideas. It's used by drug dealers, by people that are carrying out very illegal activities. The point is that, as I was saying, there are places where it's easier not to be controlled. For example, if you want to be extra sure with your electronic mail, etc. For example, another one that is very useful is Proton. Proton Mail and Proton VPN. This is at the moment considered the best one because it generated with the same principle of internet in the very beginning at the CERN in Geneva, etc. But you know, everybody will find the proper place. That's why, as I was saying, for example, at the beginning of the Ukrainian war, I had Russian students that were back home and they wanted to send information to us because they wanted to witness what was going on. And I deemed paramount their security because we set up a particular circuit using specific software and places where to share information to make sure they were not detected by other software, etc. Because just to give you an idea, ISIS was using a special application that was native in a way, specifically developed for them. The Americans had the code. They knew where they were doing these things. Nonetheless, they didn't stop it. And one was saying, why? And they said, oh, you know, because in this way we can gather intelligence, open source intelligence, etc. Others said no, because it was convenient for them for political reasons to have ISIS as active as it was, since it was generating problems to others. I mean, this is where, as you were saying, most of the time is a political issue. In fact, never forget that the military, except in certain specific cases, but even in certain authoritarian regimes, the military are the armed branch of the political part. So the military act according to the orders received by the political arm. That's it. So as you were saying, the point is that there is a political or there is not a political will.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I believe that a question that comes up naturally would be the sort of hopeful question that was asked to Massimiliano before. So what steps could we possibly take to be more wary or protect ourselves from this information? I mean, it feels like we are rather hopeless.
No, the point is, I mean, first of all, there is only a European country at the moment. I cannot say what, but there is one country that is developing a doctrine of resilience to disinformation that is generated by the military, but it involves civilian population as well. First of all, this is the way. First of all, you have first to make public opinion to realize that we are subject to military techniques operations. The other is to join in what is called civil and military cooperation, CIMIC, and we have to realize that, like it or not, there are other actors, as I said, digital authoritarian actors that are playing on us without rules. So the first thing is to let people aware. Frankly speaking, I don't think that debunking, etc., is useful. And if you allow me, I show you another piece of information that is interesting, and you will understand what I say. Let me see where I left it, because just a moment. Okay, here it is. Okay, just a moment. Oh yes, here it is. Yeah, anyway, it was. I wanted to show. Oh, how is it? Sorry, I cannot find. Oh yes, sorry. Here it is now. Okay, now I can say it. Sorry. So here it is. It's coming. No, I'm sorry. I don't know why. I just wanted to show you the page of the European Commission, this information reading. And if you read it, it's completely unusable by people because they use language terming. Oh, here it is. Okay, here it is. It's coming. Here it is. Trends of the week. Kremlin disinformation peddlers home in on the presidential elections. You see, this is completely unusable. How can you expect people that normally use social media and they are influenced by disinformation that they take the time to read all of this? Of course, I'm an academic, I'm interested, but this is not the place. And they have a Facebook page, and if you go there, you will see most of the comments are made by trollers. So, as I said, first of all, you have to generate new techniques. Debunking, it's something that can be useful, but it's better to explain. And what is, to me, from a linguistic point of view, it's reframing. You have to have units that are able to generate similar messages, reframing what is the message on the other side. Because otherwise you are just exposed to tons of, as I said, posts, comments, etc. That are not saying they are the best. Actually, what they are saying is you are the worst. Think about what Putin did at the beginning of the Ukrainian war. It was, from a communicative point of view, perfect. He used our terminology. It was a special military operation. We talk about military operations, etc. And then he resorted to the humanitarian situation because I'm invading because the Russian population there has been killed by the Ukrainian Nazis, etc. So the point is that we are democracies. We leave room for that. They use that. And the problem is that, unfortunately, we have double standards. We are the paladins of human rights, etc., but then we turn a blind eye if we want to make business with China. And this is what Putin is doing. He says, hey, but I'm using your terminology. You invaded Kosovo in 1999 and you said it was humanitarian action. We are doing the same. So the point is that for sure we need a real strategy, as I said, a really communicative strategy. We need a master message that must be clear, not fragmented as we have, because as you see, they are monolithic in this. They have one message and the message goes through. And then, of course, we have to be more coherent. Unfortunately, our democracies are far from being perfect, especially when geopolitics is concerned. Syria is an example, the Gaza-Israel conflict is another, etc. And of course, we cannot expect that our narratives that are incoherent are accepted by our population and the others. So first of all, we have to organize in a different way, as I said, through military and civil cooperation, and then to be a little bit more coherent. Because think about the European Union, what we are perceiving is a union that is made of political, economical interests, etc. This is where, as Massimiliano was saying, this gives room to the populist, this gives rooms to all of these kind of activities, because they leverage on our weaknesses.
I think what you were saying, so thank you very much. Also, what you just mentioned, made me think of the central role that euphemisms play in your research. You touch upon those quite a lot, and it's so interesting. This is historical, right? The work on euphemisms has always attracted the attention of linguists, because ideology travels through that. We are made numb.
Of course. For example, as you were mentioning, the essay I published in Massimiliano's book. For example, in fact, I start analyzing all the terminologies, because if you go through the terminologies, you understand what is the ideology behind it, even in the military. But for example, talking about the Gaza conflict, no, of course, they are talking about casualties, and even the idea of casualties, that is, the root is, by chance. It's not by chance. And for example, nobody says that the Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, has in the doctrine the specific concept of targeted killings. And the idea of targeted killings is bypassing all the others, even the right of war. The law of war is bypass the idea of targeted killings. I always made the example to my students. Michelangelo Conoscenti is a well-known terrorist, or a supposed terrorist, for the Israeli Defense Forces. We know that he is at the universities Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock. We bombed the classroom, and of course we will kill other people. But the main target was Professor Conoscenti. So it's perfectly legitimate, because it was a targeted killing. So there's not even the idea of collateral damages or side effects or casualties, etc. No, when you invent the idea of targeted killing, you have justified everything. But, and I go back to what I was saying earlier, a few people know that NATO it was attempted a trial at the Hague Tribunal for NATO during the Kosovo War for crimes against humanity. Then, luckily for NATO, as you know, United States don't recognize the International Court of the Hague, so they stopped it earlier. But we were going to be, as well as Mr. Gaddafi, as Mr. Saddam Hussein, as Mr. Milosevic, going to be there for crimes against humanity, as well as the others.
Thank you, Michelangelo. This is so dense. I would have more questions, but I would frankly like to leave the floor to others. So we are ready for your feedback. We are ready for your questions to Michelangelo Conoscenti. And as I did with Massimiliano while we're waiting for the questions, I share your email address. They know where to find you.
I have a question for Michelangelo as well.
Please, Paola.
Concerning what you said about the fact that we need a doctrine, that we need a coherent, maybe monolithical doctrine. Don't you see the risk of simply substituting one belief system with another? So what about the room for doubts that characterizes our democracies? Or in other terms, what is, since we are democracies, or at least we say we are, and we have a system of values, what about the metaphor that this is often used to represent disinformation? I mean, the viral diffusion. So do you think this is an appropriate metaphor? Or listening to you, I was thinking maybe Michelangelo conceives of the disinformation as a bombing more than a viral bacteriological war. But if we accept what is usually proposed, that is, we are in a viral toxic environment, is there, to stay in that metaphor, any room for immunization through democratic tools? That's what we try to do. But probably it's completely naive. What is your take on that?
Now, Paula, first of all, this is why, and this is in one of my recent papers for global policy, where I advanced the idea of digital authoritarian actors and digital democratic actors. So the answer is, this is a matter of defense. If we were for the military, it's very simple. What they are saying is propaganda. What we say is information. And we know that this is a very relative concept, of course. What I see is that at the moment, we are really under attack. I can tell you, until 2014, 2015, most of my concern was about NATO. So I was very critical of NATO, the way they were manipulating public opinion here in Europe and in the West. And I could share with you concerns about NATO, because there is a European NATO and an American NATO, and with very different agendas, of course. In fact, it was Obama that started the pivot to Asia, de facto the powering NATO, etc. We are complaining about Mr. Trump, but the idea of depowering NATO generated with Mr. Obama and his pivot to Asia. So the idea is that at the moment, as I was saying, we are at the center of military and informed operations from the United States and from Russia and China. So the point is, I said monolithic because they are authoritarians. I said for us it should be at least coherent, But the point is that it's really the way you approach these kind of things. So first of all, we go in a kind of random order. But this applies even to what Massimiliano was saying. For example, if you ask me what is the difference between progressives and populists that by pure chance they overlap with the right all over the world is very well coordinated in giving out a message. Why? Because they use the same spin doctor. They have just one person that is generating the narrative. And then they decline it at national level. It was Frank Luntz with the Bush administrations, and then it was the others. This is not the case for progressives or for democratic countries. So my idea is that it is a kind of civil-military cooperation. For example, people don't know that the most powerful software tool to detect information, and then it depends on how you set it, but is owned by the European Commission. It was generated immediately after 2001. At that time, it was illegal. They admitted that the way it was generated, it was illegal. But at the moment, you have a listening tool for 48 world languages that is able to capture everything that is on the web. Imagine this with a coordinated action, but you have to know what you're looking for, etc. That's why I was, and Juditha was referring to this, reverse language engineering. The idea is that by linguistic tools, we can understand what I call the language of the neighborhood. Imagine there are software that can tell you what's going on at web level. So not necessarily social media, can be website, etc. at zip code level. I could tell you Turin 10125, that is the zip code of a specific area in Turin, and I can tell you what's going on there, what they are saying, etc., etc., etc. So, we have to integrate this. Otherwise, these people will be able to imagine, and Massimiliano can witness this, Brexit. We had Mr. Elliot, the coordinator of the Brexit campaign in Turin, at a conference, and he openly said and plainly said, of course we were using false information. We were using false figures, like the one of the bars, you remember, millions of euros given to the European Union, let's have it back and give it to our NHS. He said, of course it was false. We knew that, but it worked. Unfortunately, this is the approach. And this is, Juditha, Paola, the point. It's not a matter of being naive, because I'm extremely idealistic. But because I'm idealistic, I see we are in a great danger. As I was saying, until 2014, 2015, most of my attention, academic attention, was on NATO. But then, after what we have seen, of course, I know that we have even to counter the Russian. And just to give you an idea, and that was published in 2016. So I show you something, but let me see. I have to find it because I knew that it was going to be here. And here it is. Just a moment. I'm coming. This is something that I published in 2016. Here it is. It's a scheme of the narrative trajectory. But this narrative trajectory is in a white book produced by Germans, Italians, Europeans, and NATO, so civil-military cooperation. So it's normally what you show as a trajectory. The point is that during a seminar and during a NATO meeting, this was the way it was shown. And look how many Chatham House rules are here. But what I can say is that at a point, they presented this, and this is 2014. 2014, and they say a possible narrative for the Ukrainian crisis. They say, we know that it can be labeled conspirational, etc. But the point is, look, cohesion of NATO declines. In 2014, NATO was to dissolve. NATO was to dissolve because there was no enemy. But in 2014, we have Russian invasion, of course, of a part of Ukraine, and we have ISIS. What is the best friend of NATO? Vladimir Putin. Because the opponent is public opinion. They don't want us to buy weapons, NATO says. And what happens? You have several problems. I just mentioned that Soros on CNN publicly declared that these NGOs had a very important role in what happened on may I stop just a moment because I have a problem. Sorry, I will be back in a second. Sorry. Okay, no, it's fine. So I said, he said, my ONGs had a role on what happened in Ukraine in 2014, Maidan, Plaza, etc. And look at the resolution. Russia controls Ukraine, NATO achieves cohesion, can increase spending, public feels safe again. Do you remember what happened 2 weeks after? 2 weeks after the invasion of Ukraine? All the European parliaments immediately increased to 2% of the GDP, the expenses for military expenses. That was an effect that the Americans looked for in the past 20 years. It was enough 2 weeks of conflict in Ukraine to have this effect. So I say, I'm completely aware of these. And, you know, we have to remember, and sorry, but I knew that in a way or in another was going to be here. This is what, sorry, I have to find the page. Sorry, because, okay. It's a very interesting quotation. Here it is. This is 2002. Karl Rove, that was George W. Bush's senior advisor and chief political strategist, he said that the Aid said that journalists are in what we call a reality-based community, which he defined as people who believe that solutions emerge from your judicious study of discernible reality. I nodded and murmured something about Enlightenment principles and empiricism. He cut me off. That's not the way the world really works anymore, he continued. We are an empire now, and when we act, we create our own reality. And while you are studying that reality, judiciously as you will, we'll act again, creating other new realities, which you can study too. And that's how things will sort out. We are history's actors, and you, all of you, will be left to will be left to just study what we do. So, you know, Paola, that's the problem. We must be very realistic and realize that it's not giving up part of our ideals, but is to make sure that our ideals are not the weaknesses that the opponents can use to leverage on our thing. Because, as I said, it's the idea of failed truth and failed state. Dugin and Gerasimov doctrine are pivotal about this. They say, you know, we have just to cast the dot on them. And as you said, democracies cultivate that. But we have to cultivate that not to the point to admit that all the other explanations are acceptable. Because then, and again, we go back to Massimiliano, we have conspiracy theories, etc. And you have to demonstrate that your scientific theory is true. And this is crazy.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Paul, I don't know if you have any other questions, or if other colleagues or people from the audience have questions.
Sorry, Giuditta, sorry if I interrupt you. While we were talking, I added, as you can see in the chat, a link. It's a very, this is public, so you can access it openly. It's by the NATO Rapid Deployment Corps, when they had a seminar on social media and weaponization. So because weaponizing has been quite frequently quoted this morning. You can have a look at this because it's interesting. And I was introducing and chairing this seminar. And Paola, as you will see, and that was 2018, I was telling the military, it's strange that a civilian is telling you that you should be more proactive, acting in a way that was the first question by Giuditta. That I was saying, you should not just attack enemies, but also defend us from this. And this is possible only if civilians and military cooperate. I always like to quote the founder of our department, when he was saying, well, actually it was the founder of the faculty, when he was saying that the Italian democracy will be mature and complete when the military are an integral part of the Italian society. And that was Norberto Bobbio. Norberto Bobbio was saying, solo quando le forze armate saranno parte integrante della nostra società civile avremo una democrazia matura. And I think this is, I mean, I know that sometimes we are suspicious towards the military, etc. What I can witness is that I never had censorship by them. I always had the opportunity to freely criticize, etc. Sometimes even more than at the university, and they are willing to learn. And for example, they are ready to cooperate. because they realize that this is possible. In fact, as I said, unfortunately, we have just one European state that is working on a doctrine on resilience to disinformation that is englobing civilians and military, because they say we are the same target.
Michelangelo, this is laudable. I mean, discourse of the military is somehow, if I may say, niche, and the fact that you're trying to open up a dialogue, you know, with the military forces and join forces with them, this is very, this is rather different, and it takes energy and it takes courage, and it is admirable. So thank you very much for what you've been doing so far for so many years.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. But, you know, I feel it's natural. And as I said, it has always been this statement by Norberto Bobbio that always guided me. Because I can tell you, you know, you should see, when I started, it was 1999. And I mean, within the Italian system, because as far as the military is concerned, I've been working since 1991. But in Italy, it was very interesting because they had plenty of biases and prejudice towards academics. To them, we are, all of us are right-wing, communists, etc. And of course, you know what are the prejudices of academics towards the military. And it was very nice to play with them with this, etc. But what I can assure you, that although from an institutional point of view, they have no political ideas, and as I said, they are the armed branch of the political power. But I can assure you that within the armed forces, Italians, but not only, because I work at national level, they perfectly represent political orientations of the population because they are part of the population. Of course, if they wear the uniform, they have something that is doctrinal. But as human beings, because when they drop off their uniform, they are civilians. And I found a variety of political positions, etc. For example, there are a lot of European officers quite concerned about the American role. They are concerned about this expansion to the east. Some of them openly say, Chatham House rule, it's us provoking Mr. Putin. This is just a reaction of what we did in the past, etc. So it's far from being monolithic power. This is what is very interesting. And most of them are Pacific people. Of course, they say, we are the ones that want peace, because if there's war, we are busy, but it's very dangerous.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for sharing this link. People are very thankful. And I don't know if there are more questions. We are perfectly on time, but it's nice to linger on this debate, which is so interesting. Paola, I don't see any other reactions, so maybe we can gradually try and wrap up. But I hope this is an occasion to open up a dialogue with us, with the observatory in general. There is so much to do, and there is a community, a scientific community, where all this makes a lot of sense, and we are working in similar directions. Speaking of which, I would like to also, on behalf of Paola, I don't know if you want to anticipate.
Go ahead.
I go ahead. The next appointment, so the next debate, which will take place in January, the 23rd of January, the next seminar will be on linguistics and polarization. So very related indeed. And the guests will be Katarzyna Budzinska and Marcin Koszowy from the Technological University of Warsaw, together with Andrea Rocci and Claudia Coppola, Università della Svizzera Italiana in Lugano. And the next session will be moderated by Paola Pietrandrea, whom I thank very much for being such a volcanic and full of ideas colleague. She's an endless resource of of ideas. So thanks again, Paola. And we're looking forward to the next seminar.
Thank you. And probably since we are the last session of the year, we can wish all of us, let's say, a good new year, a collective good new year, good enough. I mean.
Sorry, Paola, if I interrupt, and even Judita, may I ask you if you have a mailing list? Because, you know, keeping an eye on everything is always difficult. But if you have a mailing list for the center, so that when new events are coming and you just drop a line with the link, is very important.
We have a few mailing lists, and you are right. One of the tasks for next year should be just to merge the different mailing lists in one. But in any case, we have a mailing list with the former, current, and future speakers of our session. So you are on the mailing list. But Carolina, who is helping us to organize all these things, can receive your suggestion. We can actually, Carolina, unify, merge the different mailing lists and have one mailing list for the débat sur le débat, for the seminar. Thank you very much, Michelangelo. So you really need organization, not only we all. We need your advices on organization, not only NATO. I mean, there is a dispersion of information even in Lille, and not only in NATO. Thank you very much. I mean, it was, I admit it was a quite basic suggestion, but we are Democrats. Thank you again, Michelangelo. Thank you again, Massimiliano.
Thank you very much, Paola and Judita.
Yes. Thank you very much. And as you saw, I'm quite passionate about this. And Judita, I do thank you for what you said, because it's a peculiar task, the one that I gave to myself. But if some of you needs help or would like to explore more on this, please contact me as Judita suggested, and I will be very happy. And thank you very much for offering this opportunity. And it's the first time that Massimiliano and myself openly discuss in a forum these two aspects of our research that, of course, match very well together.
Yeah, life is never straightforward, is it?
No, never.
Thank you all, and many wishes for the holiday season. This is how to say it in politically correct way. Bye-bye. Thank you, Caroline, for your
bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. All the very best.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye.